Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the short-term rental updates and 2026 World Cup hosting opportunities webinar. Today is December 11th, 2025. My name is Christina Hudson. I'm CEO of One Redmond and founding partner of One Eastside, and I will be your host for the program for today. So to start things off, we have Kim Dietz, Creative Economy and Small Business Permit Liaison from the City of Redmond. And next we'll have Scott Brownlee, Senior Manager, Host Growth and Experience at Airbnb, and Muni Sodhi, Superhost Ambassador at Airbnb. And helping with our questions and joining us for a Q&A today, we have Denise Shinoda, Business License Program Coordinator with the City of Redmond, and we also have Sean Palmer, our Certified Business Advisor for One Redmond and One Eastside.
Good evening, everyone. It's great to be on this call with you this evening. I am the Creative Economy Small Business Permit Liaison for the City of Redmond in the Economic Development Department. I've been with the city for 29 years, and I was the staff lead along with Denise, who took the amendments that you're going to hear about tonight forward to our City Council for their consideration. Okay, we're going to cover three aspects of the regulations this evening. The first is business licensing requirements, which will go into effect January 1 of 2026. We're also going to talk about some clarity regarding consumer safety, transportation, and communication standards that will be available both in the code or as guidelines through a short-term rental guide that we will be providing. And then finally, some amendments to our code for conformance with state legislation. So let's start with the state definition of short-term rentals. And the reason is that the City of Redmond adopted this by reference. So this definition of short-term rentals means, of course, not a hotel, motel, or bed and breakfast. What it does mean is a dwelling unit or a portion of a dwelling unit. So that would be a house or an apartment, an ADU, that is offered for rental to a guest for a short term, and that term would be fewer than 30 consecutive nights. Now, what this does not include, I'll start with a question that was asked to us, and that was, would a caretaker's unit be included? If we look back at the definition, this says it's offered for a fee, and a caretaker unit is most likely not offered for a fee. In fact, that person is providing a service to the people that live in that dwelling unit. So that would not be a short-term rental. Also, if the owner of a unit is living in that unit or that home for at least 6 months or more during a calendar year, and it's not an or, it's an and, is offering fewer than 3 rooms for rent at any given time, that would not be a short-term rental. Another one is if a dwelling unit, residential home, is used by the same person for 30 or more consecutive nights, that would not be a short-term rental. That instead is a long-term rental and would not apply to the code that we are discussing this evening. And then finally, for organizations and governments that are providing charitable services in the form of housing, that would also not be a short-term rental. So the next slide. Okay. The legislation at the state level is adopted in other areas by reference through our city code. This next one is consumer safety. And we're highlighting this one because there are certain provisions in the state law that call upon cities to enforce them. And so let's start at the very bottom of what you're seeing here. So if there is a violation with the state law, the city or the county attorney must issue a warning letter to the owner or operator. And if the violation continues, then there are other actions that take place by the city or the county. So given that, what we did is we referenced this 6437030 consumer safety in our local regulations. And they call for certain communications with your operator or from your operator, and Airbnb would be an example of an operator. Also communications with your local government. And then finally, one of the most important provisions is the installation of a carbon monoxide alarm. So these are the requirements throughout Washington state. And we, as a city, will be looking for these as part of an easy checklist that all operators will be asked to complete. How does the Redmond business license work when it applies to your short-term rental? So there are two ways. One Redmond business license, or RBL, will be required for each mixed-use multifamily development, not unit by unit, but development. And the reason is that in the case of many mixed-use or multifamily types of buildings, say in our downtown or Overlake or Marymore, these are operated by one entity, a management company. So one license is needed for them to provide short-term rentals. And there are other provisions that will apply. So that manager is going to be responsible for the short-term rentals in their development. In all other areas, other forms of development, such as such as residential dwellings or accessory dwelling units, one Redmond business license is required per each individually addressed short-term rental unit. So this means if you have one address for your home, and in your home you have 2 units, 3 units, whatever the mix is that are being rented out, but it's one address, well, then one Redmond business license would be required. If, however, it's a combination of a residential unit, a primary home, and an accessory dwelling unit separated in the back with a new address, with a separate address like A and B, then each of those would be required to have a business license for the short-term rental. In addition to the code requirements, there are some submittal requirements that the city will be asking for. The first, I mentioned earlier, a safety checklist. This safety checklist is going to highlight both the requirements at the state level and guidelines at the city level. And it's there to help you ensure that you are thinking through on an annual basis all of those safety provisions that are important to ensure that someone coming into your home or to your accessory dwelling unit or apartment is familiar with Redmond, has the information they need to be safe in Redmond and to be safe in your home. The other piece is a tenant protection posting. This is a requirement that our city council asks for, and this ensures that anyone who is renting, whether it's short-term, long-term, apartment, residential, home, that they have information available to make sure that the rental is fair and that their tenant rights are available for viewing. So that's simply a posting of information that will be available at our Development Services Center starting January 1. I'm going to pass my computer now to Denise Shinoda, and she is going to talk about the business licensing process for the city of Redmond.
Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Shinoda. I handle business licensing for the city of Redmond, and it's great to have you all here tonight. The Washington State Business License identifies the Redmond business license as a city endorsement. So there's times that you're going to be hearing these two terms, a Redmond business license or a city endorsement. And I just want to let you know that these are this one and the same thing. And the reason why it is referred to a city endorsement by the Department of Revenue is you can see on this screen, you see an example of a Washington State business license on here. In the center, it says city, county endorsements. And then below that, you'll see Redmond home occupation business and then showing as an active. So the DOR lists it as a city endorsement. It's really a Redmond business license / Washington State license. The steps you'll need to do to apply for a Redmond business license or your Redmond city endorsement. The first thing you'll need to do is decide on your business structure. Most people elect a limited liability company, LLC, a corporation, or something else. Those people who choose this type of structure will first register with the Washington Secretary of State. The address is here on the screen. And then once they've registered with the Washington Secretary of State, they will send a UBI number to you. Once you have that UBI number, you will then be able to go to the Department of Revenue website at dor.wa.gov, and that's where you will apply for your Washington State business license and your Redmond City endorsement. If you elect to open a sole proprietorship, you don't have to go to the Secretary of State at all. You will go directly to the DOR homepage at dor.wa.gov, and that's where you will apply for your Washington State license and your city endorsement. There's two ways to apply once you're actually on the DOR website, and you can follow either path, whichever you're most comfortable with. If you would like to go through the business licensing wizard, you can follow the steps that are in the first line, open a business, get started, get the licensing requirements, and then type in a keyword, short-term rental. There'll be a number of different questions that you're asked through that process, and then it will spit out information of kind of the process that you would need to follow in order to get your Washington State license as well as your Redmond City endorsement. So in this case, if you had elected to answer that you wanted to open an LLC, it would direct you first that you need to go to the Secretary of State site first. So it kind of gives you a summary of all the things that you would need to do if you use the licensing wizard. It gives you more information, and then you have the option to actually apply for your license at that point, and that's when you would start entering the details. If you choose not to use the business licensing wizard, you can use the drop-down boxes from the DOR homepage, I want to, and then get or renew a license. This will take you to the Secure Access Washington or SAW login screen, and you will either have to create a SAW account, or if you have an existing SAW account, you would log into that. Once you're logged into your SAW account, you'll have an option to apply for a new business license. You would then select, I want to start a business in Washington State. And if you have elected an LLC or a corporation, you'll be prompted to enter the UBI number that the Secretary of State has given you. Notes about the application itself. When entering information, make sure the location address is the rental address that you will be using, your short-term rental address. The mailing address can be different from the location address. One of the questions will be to estimate the hours to be worked by employees in the next 12 months in this city. We recognize you probably don't have employees doing this. What you simply need to enter are the hours that you expect to spend overseeing your short-term rental. The minimum licensing fee will be applied to any number of hours that are 2,000 or less. And then for the 2025 year, the licensing fee is $153. And beginning in 2026, the licensing fee is $160. This license will be good for a full year from the time of application. If you have any questions about the application itself, reach out to DOR Customer Service. They're great. Their phone number is here on the screen. If you prefer to self-serve, from the DOR homepage at the bottom of the page, there's 3 blue boxes. The first one is titled Businesses. Within that box, you'll see My DOR Help. Click into that, and you'll find step-by-step instructions to do a lot of different things on the DOR site that's helpful. Also, you can reach out to me at businesslicense@redmond.gov or call at 425-556-2193. The next question is, how long before I receive my Redmond business license or my Redmond City endorsement? The DOR will typically tell you it will take 10 days for them to process it, and then it may take another 2 to 3 weeks for the city to process it. Generally speaking, once you make your application to the DOR, the city will receive that application within 2 to 3 days unless they have a significant backlog. Once the application is received by the city, it will take up to 2 weeks for the city reviewers to take a look at your application and make any comments. Then once that review period has taken place, the license will be activated and the DOR will email a notification that the Washington State business license can be printed. And then, of course, as I showed you earlier, the Washington State license will show your Redmond City endorsement as active. And as I mentioned earlier, the license will be valid for 1 year. And In order to renew your license, you will log into your Secure Access Washington account or SAW account, and the DOR will send a reminder, an email reminder, 60 days prior to the expiration date.
And this is Kim Dietz again. And you are looking at the short-term rental webpage that is hosted on the city's website. To find this webpage, which has a variety of resource items for you regarding short-term rentals, you can use the URL that is shown at the lower left. You can type in redmond.gov short-term rentals, plural. You can also use the search window that is located in the upper right of the screen and type in short-term rentals. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Denise and I, and we are happy to help you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kim and Denise. Next, we turn the program over to Scott Brownlee.
Thanks so much, Christina. Hello, everybody in the audience. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. Just wanted to flag that I'm really excited to share a little bit about Airbnb with you all. If you're thinking of becoming an Airbnb host or you're a current host, have some tips and ideas for you. And you'll also hear from Muni here in a second, who is a fantastic local host who's been doing this for many years and will have great insights for you. Next slide, please. So if you didn't know, Airbnb is one of the main sponsors of FIFA, and we're really excited about this opportunity to help hosts in the Seattle Metro get ready to welcome thousands of folks. Hopefully they all fit in the stadium and beyond this year in June and July. And just want to give you some faces that will be familiar in the coming months. As Christina mentioned, my name is Scott Brownlee, and I work specifically with new hosts at Airbnb. So if you're someone who hasn't hosted before and you have questions about the process, my team, which is relatively new at Airbnb, we've been around about a year, we provide free support to you to help you get your listing live, and then we stay with you and offer support through your first booking. So holding your hand through that journey, that can be very helpful. Sarah Beach, you see on the screen here, is not on the webinar tonight, but she will be at the event on the 13th of January to meet folks in person, and she works with current hosts, oftentimes hosts that have been doing the work of hospitality for many years specifically, so Muni and folks like him. But you'll see both of us at upcoming events we'll have in the Seattle Metro and also in Redmond. And this is pretty obvious to everybody, but events are obviously a big demand generator. And it's unique that World Cup is coming to North America in this context where we have 16 cities represented, a very unique format. And here's just some numbers on estimated impact. This comes from a study that Airbnb worked with Deloitte to get some numbers on. So 5 million FIFA-specific tourists coming to the North America region. Again, as I mentioned, 16 host cities. There were almost 17, but Montreal didn't make the final list. We've got 212 million in estimated host earnings that will happen across those 16 cities, and 1.7 million, that's a large number, Airbnb guest nights that Airbnb is forecasting will happen over the 5 years after the event. So this could be an opportunity, if you haven't hosted before, to maybe have some guests who fall in love with Redmond and the surrounding towns and come back to the area every summer, which we're excited about. I already mentioned that we're the official we are a partner, and we're technically the official alternative accommodations booking platform for FIFA. So what that means is if you've been on the FIFA site as you're planning out maybe your own viewing of matches and just kind of curious about FIFA, you'll see that there's an option oftentimes to book an Airbnb on those pages. And we're also expecting 380,000 guests to use Airbnb for stays during the FIFA World Cup across those 16 markets that I mentioned. So each city is a little different. Seattle has 6 guaranteed matches, so that's about in the middle in terms of number of total matches. And the economic impact, obviously really exciting, 3.6 billion for host city economies. You can divide that by 16, which you probably shouldn't trust me to do that on this call here, but a significant amount of economic development being brought to Redmond, Seattle, and the broader metro. Just want to flag a couple other just kind of fun nuggets. So event travel is especially popular among Gen Z and millennials. And in addition, young travelers are more likely to travel for events. I think it'll be interesting to see what the final mix ends up being of soccer fans. You'll see here 39% of football fans are age 16 to 34. Travel is also going to be expensive for this event, so I think that we might end up leaning a little less toward millennials, but we'll have to see what happens and who ends up attending. And just want to highlight for you all a couple of kind of tips and high-level concepts before Muni really dives deeply into the mechanics of what hosting looks like in Redmond and the surrounding areas. Airbnb has many, many resources for you, and the best way to access these usually is to Google the word Airbnb and then the topic you're trying to address. And then from there, you'll be brought to the library of resources. All sorts of topics covered here, anything from managing and kind of setting up your listing to getting paid as a new host and other topics that you'll be curious to learn about. And just wanted to frame a couple of things that Muni is going to go into more detail on. But just thinking about strategy, it's going to be helpful as a new host to consider adjusting your strategy for FIFA to capture demand trends. And when I say demand trends, the first thing you want to do is look at and think about your calendar. So the matches have the draw has happened. That happened on December 5th, and you can see here on screen some of the matches that are set to happen. And something that's really unique about Seattle, I want to point out a couple of things. That USA versus Australia match should be a really big demand generator, right? All the US fans, that could be the last match the US plays in the World Cup if they don't do well in pool play, which is kind of interesting. Hopefully they advance a little further, but we'll probably see a lot of demand from the Australians as well. I think they travel well for events like this. And then the other thing that's interesting is that in July you'll see that round of 32 match and that round of 16 match. Those are going to be essentially playoffs, so kind of the deeper rounds of FIFA, and that'll be more last minute booking for travel more than likely, right? Because fans won't know if their favorite team is playing. If Messi, for example, is playing for Argentina in that round of 32 match, we won't know until closer to the event. But as you think about your calendar and your availability as a new host, obviously you want to make sure that these dates are available. And just another couple of high-level thoughts before I turn it over to Muni. Just want to note that great visibility for your listing as a new host starts with competitive pricing and availability, and you want to consider strategies that focus on affordability and capturing demand. And if you wanted to distill this down in terms of three buckets that you could think about, attractive pricing is going to be one, and I'll actually go ahead and throw a link in the chat that you all can click on if you want. That goes to our calculator, which I'll show you a picture of in a moment, where you can estimate how much you could earn as an Airbnb host. You also want to make sure that availability is open. Sometimes I help hosts get their listing live, and they forget to leave open the most important windows, those most important weekends. In this case, it would be those matches. So be sure to do that. And then as you get further into hosting, you'll start thinking about your reviews and other things that you can do to be a successful host in the Airbnb marketplace longer term. This is a picture, a screenshot of sorry for the apologies for the long link in the chat there, but this is a link to our calculator that shows you how much you could earn. This is an estimator. But the other thing you can do if you're curious is you can log into your Airbnb account and imagine that you are a guest that's going to come stay in Seattle or in Redmond or another town in the nearby area, and you can search that right now for the dates during FIFA and see what your neighbors are charging on the platform. That's one of the benefits of an open marketplace is pricing is transparent. You can see what everyone is charging. And I just want to highlight a couple of things here that I think are fun, and I think that fun is going to be a big part of FIFA, but also community. And my team does provide free support and help to new hosts, as I mentioned. And so we're connecting with folks in market. And I just wanted to show you a couple of examples of that on screen. So here we've got Mary, who's a co-host that I've been working with, who's got some clients who are onboarding their properties as we speak in the Seattle area. And then Andrew and Zilmil are co-hosts like Muni, who you're going to hear about from a second, that have clients all over town that they're helping get ready. So it's just a really fun community. And this will just be some kind of photos in action. So a big part of this event is partnering across orgs. And so here, this is a dinner that Sarah, who I mentioned earlier, Sarah Beach and I had with the Seattle Sounders. We're working on some cool things with them tied to celebrating FIFA properly. And we can make some more announcements about that in the future, but just a fun event. And then I've actually done a lot of meeting in person with hosts and co-hosts in the area to get to know how they're thinking about FIFA, how they're planning ahead for it. So this is Tao Tao, who's a great co-host in the Seattle Metro. And then here's another co-host with maybe the coolest bookshelf on the Airbnb platform right now, Alan Bond. This is a home that he manages for a client of his that is in Seattle proper, but one of the most high performing properties in Seattle. And he's just a really passionate host that I was excited to meet. And what I wanted to offer here is you'll see on screen a QR code that you can scan. That'll link to my calendar. I'll also share that in the in the chat here in a second when Muni starts presenting, but you're welcome to schedule a free call with me if you're new to hosting and you have any questions about the process, getting set up. We want you to be able to put a real person to Airbnb and be able to connect with a real human, and I will be that touch point for you throughout your prep for FIFA World Cup. This link will also be distributed post-event through the planning team for today's event. So just know that there'll be another chance to grab it if you don't have your phone in front of you. And it's my pleasure transitioning here to hand the proverbial microphone over to Muni Sodhi, who I actually had the pleasure of having lunch with today. This is actually another lunch we had. We get lunch together a lot. He's going to tell you about hosting from the perspective of someone who actively owns and operates Airbnbs across Seattle, but specifically in Redmond. And I know he's going to have some specific insights and things that he's excited to tell you more about.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. I'm super excited to talk to you all. My name is Muni Sodhi, and as Scott mentioned, I am a Superhost Ambassador for Airbnb. I also professionally co-host through my own business called Queen Anne Holdings. So let me tell you a little bit about our story and how we got started. Back in 2018, I was working for Amazon at the time here in Seattle, and I had an incredible job opportunity that came up, and it required me to move to Salt Lake City for what was described as short job training. I arrived in Salt Lake City, and I very quickly realized I would be probably staying in Salt Lake City for about 12 months. Reality quickly kicked in. I realized I had a mortgage back in Seattle, and I was also renting an apartment, Airbnb at the time in Salt Lake City, which ended up being very costly. So on a whim, I decided to basically list my one-bedroom condo in Queen Anne remotely. I had friends and family help me photograph it, set it up, and publish it on Airbnb. Within 2 to 3 weeks, I was cash flowing significantly, and I was actually covering my entire mortgage. And so that was kind of the catalyst and the eye-opening moment, right, where I realized, oh, this is a huge opportunity, and ultimately that's what led me to start Queen Anne Holdings Property Management. So fast forward about 7 years. Today, we professionally co-host more than 25 plus properties across different cities throughout Seattle, the East Side. These are pictures of live units that we manage and operate. I think the two on the left you see are based in Kirkland, and the two on the right are our newest listing in Redmond. So let's get into hosting, practical hosting 101. Scott hit on this already a little bit, but it's super important when you begin your hosting journey to understand what demand looks like for your home. So assess if your space is a good fit. Let's be pragmatic, right? Start by looking at your space through the eyes of a potential guest. What is it that's going to make your property stand out? Is it the location? Is there some unique features? Do you have a pool, hot tub, or is there maybe more of a story behind it? You're going to want to consider these elements and decide, is it an ideal candidate for a short-term rental, or is it maybe something that shouldn't be on short-term rental platforms? The more you can kind of nail the property fit, the better it's going to translate into a memorable guest stay and ultimately cash flow for the host, which is you, the property owner. There's different property types and amenities, and this will have a different appeal for different guest personas. So kind of questions to ask yourself, are you offering a cozy studio perfect for solo travelers, or do you maybe have more of a spacious single family home, which is perfect for large families? Another very popular home type, right, is for corporate travelers and folks that work from home. So folks that might be in the tech, industrial, nursing, or education space. Furthermore, within short-term rental, it has a bunch of its own lingo, much of which is adopted from the hotel industry. So I've listed out just a few here. ADR is average daily rate. Occupancy rate is your days booked over a specific time period. You'll hear OTA a lot, which is online travel agency. Airbnb is a perfect example of that. RevPAR, this is probably one that most folks have not heard of, but the way to think of it is revenue or cash flow per available rental night. So let's talk a little bit about Redmond specifically. So Redmond's short-term rental landscape today, all of this data is sourced publicly online. There are about 200 plus active short-term rentals. That data comes directly from Airbnb, AirDNA, and Price Labs. There's about 10 established hotels in Redmond, which equals about 1,600 available rooms per night. And then furthermore, as many of you already know, Redmond does benefit from very diverse and strong traveler demand. It is a regional and international tech hub. There's industrials, there's lots of concerts that happen at Marymore, and there's also lots of regional visitors from across Washington and our neighboring states that also come to Redmond. What to expect in 2026? As the team just previewed for you, Redmond is announcing new STR regulations and permitting, which will be going live in January 2026. And then obviously, as we have hinted at, and Scott has just hinted at, we do have some massive demand generation happening in the form of 2026 FIFA World Cup. So let's dive a little deeper. Understand your local pricing and short-term rental supply and demand. So starting with calculating your revenue, Scott mentioned this earlier. Airbnb does have a really great tool. It's called the Airbnb calculator. You can click into that link and you can, based on your area and the number of bedrooms you may have in your home, you can get a quick estimate for what your home may earn. Once you've kind of figured out what the size of the revenue opportunity is, you're going to want to create a budget. Outline all your initial setup costs as well as any ongoing expenses. So things like utilities, taxes, maintenance, cleaning turnovers, and home supplies. Get familiar with the short-term rental pricing tools that are available to us. Airbnb is a great place to start. They have dynamic smart pricing built into the platform, and I highly recommend starting there. As you get more experienced, you may decide you want even more advanced pricing. So there are third-party software providers such as Price Labs or Wheelhouse, which will help you fine-tune your pricing. If you're more curious about what demand looks like and supply looks like, a great market research tool is AirDNA. Kind of into the next section here, automation of your STR. So Airbnb is obviously one OTA, but there are several that play in the space. And so channel management software such as Hostaway or Guesty are great options to help enable API integration with these OTAs. Channel management software is going to provide a lot of automation in terms of guest communication, smart locks, reviews, lots of automation as you get more advanced and further along in your journey. So designing and optimizing your listing for success online. So we talked a little bit about this, but when you're questioning, is your house a good fit for as a short-term rental, determine what the style and branding of your short-term rental will be. You want to aim for a balance between style, comfort, and practicality. Your space should reflect a unique aesthetic that stands out in listings, but also feels welcoming and homely to a wide array of guests. The furniture and decor you put inside your short-term rental should match your guest's expectation and the price point you're setting. So if you are marketing a luxury short-term rental, some guests are going to expect high-end furnishings, while budget travelers may settle for clean, functional, and comfortable spaces. I've listed a bunch of the top amenities here. I'll call out just a few of them, as I know we do have limited time. But in no particular order, high-speed Wi-Fi that has mesh Wi-Fi throughout your house, really big popular amenity that everybody wants. Having a dedicated workspace within the home. If you can get a standing desk with an ergonomic chair, even better. And then definitely, targeting towards families and making sure your home is child friendly, having a pack and play crib, outlet covers, toys and games for the kiddos. And as I mentioned, there's a bunch of different amenities that people are looking for, but just wanted to highlight those top three. Let's talk a little bit about short-term versus mid and long-term. So with short-term, let's talk about some of the pros here. Very flexible. If you want to use it for your personal use, you can do that. If you want to rent it out, for a portion of the year and maybe not the whole year, short-term rental is an excellent option. Easier to update pricing based on demand. It's better property oversight as you will be turning your home more often. During the peak summer periods, right, you may have 3 or 4 different guests checking in and out in a week. So that allows you to get into the property, ensure it's clean, and quickly do any maintenance that needs to happen. Let's talk a little bit of some of the takeaways or cons for short-term rentals. It is a higher operational workload, right? There's cleaning, there's client messaging, and turnovers. There is also seasonal revenue fluctuations that we should be aware of. For those of us that are familiar with Washington State, we have the most beautiful summer, but our winter season, as it has been the last few days, can be quite dismal sometimes. And that does impact, how much guests want to come and visit our state and stay here. So those are things to think about. I'll call out just a few more here. I know we're limited on time, but one of the big things with short-term rentals, there is a Washington State's short-term rental tax, which is approximately 15.5%. That'll be added on to your ADR and booking amount. If we flip over to medium-term or longer-term furnished rentals, the pros here are it is stable and predictable monthly income. It's lower workload as you will have one tenant that stays much longer as opposed to many tenants that are staying for a shorter period. Your operating costs may also be lower as a result because you will be performing less cleanings and turnarounds, and there will be less consumption of supplies by guests. There's less regulatory pressure here, right? Washington State has gone out and defined what a short-term rental is, as was previewed earlier in this presentation. If you have a guest that is staying 30 days or longer, a lot of those restrictions do not apply. And then we just talked about this. With short-term rentals, there is a Washington State short-term rental tax. With 30-day and longer bookings, there is not that 15.5% tax. As we look at some of the cons here, right? Lower revenue potential in general. You will be having guests stay longer and most times at a lower ADR. There's also less flexibility. So if you want to personally use your property, you may not be able to get in there because you might have a guest staying there. So I'll just kind of stop there on this one. I think Scott previewed this. We do have 6 massive tentpole events happening. As Scott mentioned, June 19th is going to be a very large one for us, as that's a home match for Team USA. And then hopefully, if USA makes it long enough and far enough, July 1st and July 6th are also poised to be very large drivers, which both of those bookings coming in a much quicker time frame, as that will not be decided until towards the end of June. So let's talk a little bit about case studies and what we've seen when we have high demand periods. So these ones should hit right at home, whether it's the Seahawks NFC game or the Mariners playoffs, which just happened. I'll kind of let you guys take a peek at this here, but on the left side here, you have different listing types from 1 bedroom all the way up to 4 bedroom and plus. Next to that, you have your baseline, nightly rate, what we saw. And then for each section, you have, kind of different scenarios, different dates, depending on what's happening. So you can see, in most cases here, you're seeing a 1.5 to 3x nightly rate change, depending on the event and how much demand is being generated. So this is an example specifically around Seahawks and the Mariners and what we've seen in the past. Some pricing tips for these high demand periods, right? You're going to want to increase your minimum night stay. You typically to minimum of 3 and to a maximum of 5 nights for those high traffic dates so that you can take advantage and try to fill up your calendar. You're also going to want to use dynamic pricing tools, either through Airbnb or through a vendor like Price Labs, to optimize and make sure you're not leaving revenue on the table. If you have a listing that's close to stadiums or close to transit, definitely highlight that. And then, as we think about FIFA, if you have the ability to do so, definitely market it in a way where we're attracting football and soccer fans from the world. So just wanted to kind of put this in here for you all as well. We have sports that generate demand, right? And then we also have concerts, whether it's Taylor Swift, Beyonce, or the solar eclipse that happened last year. Very similar chart. Just wanted to kind of drive the point home that there are different types of events and they all generate significant demand. Like I said, typically between 1.5 to 3x the nightly rate, depending on, the event or whatever the driver is there. So my business is called Queen Anne Holdings. We're based in Seattle. If any of you are interested in connecting further, I would be happy to connect with you and set up some time. Please don't hesitate to reach out. You can scan that QR code to set up time with me. Thank you.
We are going to go ahead and wrap up. And as we close today, another reminder about the in-person follow-up to this webinar. Again, is January 13th from 11:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. at City Hall. Check out their QR code. We will work on having workstations there, or you can bring your laptop if you want assistance in getting set up with your business license or the Department of Revenue site. So know we are here on January 13th to help you get all that done. And I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of you for participating in our webinar today. So until we see you again, this concludes our program. Thank you.